So what we're going to do, last time we talked about an annuity. An annuity is a stream of cash payments over time made at regular intervals. This is different than just a straight lump sum of money, which is a one-time amount of money that moves through time with interest. But the example we looked at last time, we talked about how you can save money to reach a goal maybe you want to do, or you want to put aside a given amount of money each month so that you can end up with a certain amount of money, or you could calculate how much money you'll end up with when you're ready to, say, retire, or when you're ready to start using whatever savings you've built up. So there's really only a handful of popular vehicles for things that you'll borrow money for. You could borrow money for school loans. That has a payment structure and whatnot that we won't necessarily discuss here. You can borrow money to buy a house. That's called a mortgage. A mortgage. What's funny about the word mortgage? Well, we'll talk about that. We'll be talking about buying a home here. All the math behind it. And then I guess the other really most popular kind of loan you can get is a car loan, a note they might call it, where you are paying off a car over time. You borrow money because how many of you have, $15,000, $20,000 laying around to buy a car with? Most of us don't, and that's totally okay. That's how it works. And so what you do is you get a loan, someone pays for the car for you, and you pay them back. There's all kinds of different ways you can pay them back, but it's ultimately called an installment loan because you're paying it back in installments, usually monthly. Usually you'll have a monthly car payment. That's far and away the most popular kind of payment. What's interesting is this is still considered an annuity because the payments you're making to pay down the loan are the cash flows that constitute an annuity. They are regular payments being made. So just kind of keep that in mind. We're going to have a nice little formula. It's going to be very similar to previous formulas that we've been using, but there is a subtle difference. We can use a formula to calculate the payment that will be necessary if you are borrowing P dollars, capital P, at an interest rate of R with N compounding periods per year and T years. T is really small down here. It's in the denominator. Also notice something really weird. There's a negative sign. There's a negative sign on the exponent. That is not an accident. That is exactly what's going on. So a negative sign. So again, is this a formula you necessarily have to memorize straight up? No, this is a formula that would be provided to you on our next exam. By the way, our next exam is going to be 1 week from today, Wednesday, March the 10th, as it's written in the syllabus. I will provide you with the formula sheet. Also, since we're meeting in person now and taking our exams in person, I will have it all printed off for you, and you'll write directly on the exam, show me your work on the exam, and you'll have a detachable formula sheet with the exam. It'll be what? No, it'll be pen and paper. Yeah, it'll be kind of a more standard exam. Yeah, and I know some people like the online exams. Some people prefer to take pen and paper exams, and we're going to be doing pen and paper exams for the rest of the semester, with the exception of the final exam, perhaps. We'll see with the math department. We might just be meeting in here with our laptops to take the final exam. Yeah, I can understand that. Yeah. No, I totally understand it. And so we're doing away with it. And for the final exam, it'll be online, but it'll be that we're meeting in person. We're meeting in person taking it, so we won't need the honor lock or anything like that. So great question. So yes, a formula sheet will be provided to you for the next exam. That next exam is March 11th, March the 10th, 1 week from today. It will be in person. We will be meeting in the actual room. Remember, that's in the tech building. This is room 214, right? 214. I'm going to double check. It is. It should. Yeah, it used to be called the tech building. Now it's called the Jim and Valletta Boyd building. But so let me reiterate that. So we're talking about how do we pay off a car? This is going to be the formula we use. The formula does not necessarily have to be memorized. It's going to be provided for you in a formula sheet. Also, what I think we'll do is on Monday when we're meeting in person, bring your calculators. You're supposed to bring them anyways, but bring your calculators and I can help you in person. I can show you kind of how to punch the buttons in correctly. We can even stay a little late for those who want to, and I can help you with your calculators because that's going to be very important that you know how to use them effectively. Sometimes all that parentheses business I was showing you isn't always easy to master, and I totally understand that, and I want to work with you on that. Okay, so let's look at a couple different kinds of loans. But really, it's the same loan, but we're going to look at two different financing options. Financing is the fancy word for saying you're getting a loan to pay it off or to help you buy it. So you want a $20,000 car. Hey, $20,000 will get you, or will come close to getting you a nice brand new Honda Civic. And a Honda Civic, you can drive that thing into the moon. You can drive it past the heat death of the universe because a Honda Civic will last you forever. Hondas are really well-made cars. Am I being paid by Honda to say this? Yes. No, I'm not. I'm not being paid, but it's a good car. Toyota Corolla is also a really good car. So $20,000 can, well, that is not cheap, but it's not nothing. That can get you a really good car that'll last a long time. You're going to look at financing it through two different options. Your first option, installment loan A, you're going to look at getting a 3-year loan with 7%. No matter what, you're going to be making monthly payments. Installment loan B, you're going to pay it off over 5 years, but you have to pay 9% interest on it. So by paying it off over a longer period, your monthly payment may be cheaper, which may be what you need to fit into your budget. But what we're going to see is that not only does a longer loan carry more interest if you're talking about the same interest rate, but this second loan actually raises the interest rate. So there's going to be even more interest to worry about. So let's find the monthly payments and total interest for the first loan. So this is going to be the setup, but let's not do it that way. I like to work it together. So here's going to be our formula. So here's the skinny. You're doing loan type A. And we'll just go through what all the variables stand for ourselves. P is going to be the amount you're borrowing. It's going to be the $20,000. R is going to be the interest rate. It's 7% on this first loan. So we'll write 0.07. N is going to be the number of times interest compounds each year. Since we're making monthly payments, N is going to be 12. In fact, N will usually be 12. That's the most common kind of level for it. And I suppose all we need now is T. In this case, we're doing 3 years. The PMT, that's what we don't know. That's what we're trying to figure out here. It's going to be the monthly payment that's going to be required to pay off this loan. So let's try it out. Let's see, 20,000 times 0.07 over 12 divided by 1 minus 1 plus R over N. And now we know what R and N are, excuse me, we can actually put them in. 0.07 over 12 to the negative 12 times 3 power. Now, the $1 million question, and it's always kind of a big pain, is putting this thing into the calculator. How the heck do we do that? How do we put it in the calculator and make it follow proper order of operations? That's really the hard part of these. We need to identify the correct formula, so we have to really know what's going on in the problem. We have to know what each of the variables stand for in the formula, and then we got to figure out, hey, how the heck do we get the calculator to do this? Because this isn't something we're going to do by hand, pencil and paper. So on your next exam, of course, you're going to need to set up the formula, plug the numbers in, and show me what you did, but then you can put it into the calculator. That's going to be kind of our idea here. Here's how I would do it. Now, don't start typing in until I've fully put everything in myself. 20,000 times, I would open a parentheses, 0.07 over 12, then close that parentheses. That's the numerator. The denominator, you're going to do divided by. I'm going to open a parentheses. This parentheses I'm going to be opening is for the entire denominator. So I'll go ahead and I'll close it already, but you don't type anything yet till we get it all. 1 minus, now we need to do 1 plus. We want the 0.07 over 12 to get its own set of parentheses, so the calculator knows to do that, let that happen. Now I'm going to close this off. This now that I've closed off is this entire thing. But we got to raise that bad boy to the negative 12 times 3 power. I'm going to put the negative 12 times 3 in its own parentheses. Now be careful, because the negative sign in the calculator is not the same as when you hit the subtraction sign. If you were to do 10 minus 7 in the calculator, you're using the subtraction sign in there. The calculator uses a separate negative sign. It's usually near the bottom of the calculator, near the 0 or the decimal point. It looks like a little minus sign inside of parentheses. It's usually where it is. So make sure you make that distinction. So let's see. We need this then. And I want to say this will do it. Let me double check. Okay. Schma, do that. That should do it. Yeah, that should do it. Maybe we don't need this last one. 1, 2, 3, 4. Maybe we do, actually. Maybe we need that last. Try that out. I'll try it out as well. Again, if you're having issues with parentheses matching, then when we meet up in class in person on Monday, remember we're going to in-person meetings on Monday, and I'm going to say that about 20 times just to make sure it's clear. We can bring your calculators and I can help you with it. I can help you with putting things in. That's always going to be the hard part. So let's see if I was right. You getting something? What are you getting? That sounds about right. That sounds like it's in the right ballpark. Let's see. Let's see. $617.54. All right, that's what I'm getting. Very good. It's about $617.54 is what I'm getting. I have a little bit of, yeah, that's what they're getting. So the 2 decimal points you should be getting. So it looks like parentheses, and you follow these parentheses exactly. Perfect. Then yeah, this is how it works. I know it looks ugly, but again, on Monday, let's have a good meeting where we talk about how to use parentheses properly. Let's do that. So your monthly payment is going to be $617.54. Guys, that's not cheap, is it? That's not cheap. $600 plus. I mean, that's like a truck payment if you finance a truck for like 7 or 8 years, because trucks are expensive, brand new ones especially. So your monthly payment is $617.54. So let's do a little bit of math. $617.54. The total amount of money needed to pay off the loan. Let's think about that. You're making monthly payments of $617.54. You're doing it 12 months a year, and in this case, you're doing it for 3 years. So you would literally take this this isn't even that bad. Honestly, so the total amount of money, you borrowed $20,000, by the time you pay it all back, $22,231.44 will have left your account, will have left your pocket. So the amount of interest, the total interest then, you take the $22,231.44 and you subtract off the original $20,000 borrowed, and you get about $2,231.44, don't you? In other words, you paid a little over $2,200 in interest for the privilege of getting this car loan. Why did you pay interest? Well, because this is how companies that lend out money, that's their business. They lend out money, they get that money back with interest, they made a profit off of you. Now, while that might suck, you did borrow $20,000 and the interest was only a little bit more than 10% of what you borrowed, $2,200. That's actually not that bad. And you're paying it out over so many years, over 3 years, over so many months, you may not feel the sting of losing that money in interest. Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. No, yeah. If you get into $1,000 monthly payment for a car, if you got to have it, you got to have it. But there are cheaper cars out there, and sometimes you got to consider it. But sometimes for work, you got to get a pickup truck, and a brand new pickup truck can run you $60,000 to $70,000, which is a lot of money. So loan A had $2,231.44 in interest. We'll make that little note there in the top corner. Now let's look at loan type B so we can clear some of this. Same formula. Now let's look at loan B and let's just change the values. If you don't remember from the PowerPoint, here's what the values were in loan B. You had 9% interest and you were making payments for 5 years instead of 3 years. So you're paying this thing longer. So that's 2 extra years it's going to take you to pay this thing off, to pay off this car. So that's, more money leaving your account. 9% interest. So now all we got to do is kind of change the numbers a little bit for the 5-year loan. Instead of 0.07 here and here, it's going to be 0.09. And then instead of 3 here, we're going to put a 5. So the formula doesn't actually have to change a whole horribly lot. That's terrible English I just used. I apologize. Whole horribly lot is not a real thing to say. That means this part also only changes a little bit. We put a 5 there instead of a 3. 9% interest. Instead, the parentheses matching should still work. Let's see what we get. Let's see what we get. Okay, this monthly payment isn't as much as the last one. $415.17. We'll round to 2 decimal places. Is that what you're getting? Perfect. Yeah, good. So, yeah, that's, the last one was what, 600 something dollars? I already forget. So this monthly payment is more than $200 cheaper than the last monthly payment, but there was a higher interest rate. Also, the longer you make payments, the more interest you're actually going to end up spending over the life of the loan. Plus, you have to make payments for 2 extra years. So you don't get to pay the car off as quickly and get that money back in your budget. So now, your monthly payment is $415.17. The total amount leaving your pocket, that is the total amount you got to pay to discharge this loan, to pay it off, you do $415.17 per month times 12 months a year times 5 total years. And now you're getting 20, yep, and 20 cents. So about 24,910. Let me double check that. I am by no means perfect with the calculator. Yeah, $24,910.20. And so the total, what's that? Did you leave the previous value in? Did you update it to 415.17? For 415.17 times 12 times 5. So you left the previous value in the calculator that was out to more decimal places? Yeah, that's why you're off by a little bit. Because what I did was I rounded to the 2 decimal places and then I used that. So yeah, you'll be off just by a little bit. The total interest then is now a lot higher. It's more than twice the total interest is what you paid earlier. So now you're paying $4,910.20 in interest for loan B. So there are benefits to loan B. You get a lower monthly payment. That's really the only benefit. After that, you got to pay more in total interest. You got to make the payments for longer. So good problems to work. So back to it. And here in the PowerPoint, they rounded to the nearest dollar. So they're just off by a little bit. Now we can talk about leasing instead of buying a car. Leasing is almost just a fancy word for renting, but for a long period of time. Because when you lease a car, you are not purchasing the car yourself. What you're doing is you're basically signing an agreement that says, I'm going to drive this car, I won't destroy it, or nothing bad will come to it. And you also have to usually agree to drive it less than a certain amount of miles per year while you have the car. If you go over that mileage, you have to pay extra. So yeah, leasing is essentially a long-term rental agreement. That's exactly what it is. You're just renting the car. It's not going to be yours. Once the lease contract is up, you got to return the car and you now need to find a new car or something, or extend your lease or something. So this is way different. When you buy a car, yeah, you pay those payments off, but once you've paid it off, that thing's yours. Now it's lost a lot of value since you bought it, almost certainly, unless it's a DeLorean. But yeah, leasing has its benefits. The biggest benefit to leasing is, for one, actually, I don't know. Are you responsible for repairs for a leased car? Okay, well then that's not a benefit. Never mind. The biggest benefit to leasing is that your monthly payment's usually cheaper. You can usually lease a nice brand new car for under $300 a month, and you'll sign a 2-year lease, but you're not going to own that. The reason it's cheaper to you is because once your lease is up, they're going to turn around and lease it again or just sell it themselves. So they still get some value out of the car, even though you're paying less in monthly payments than if you were to have bought it. So that's basically how leasing works. There's 2 different types of leasing agreements, I suppose. We're not going to go into uber details about these. The biggest, though, advantages of leasing, they usually require a small down payment or maybe even no down payment. A lot of the times you'll see 0 down for 24 months, something like that. You get a 2-year lease and pay a monthly, your monthly bill on it. The payments are usually lower. So if you want to drive a brand new Mercedes and you don't have, you can't get $100,000 loan for a nice brand new Mercedes, but you just got to have it, or you got to have that brand new Beamer. You might be able to afford it with leasing, and there's nothing wrong with that. This is America. You got options there, and it's even funnier because usually when you buy a car, the second you drive it off the lot, that thing loses value, doesn't it? Meaning that it didn't literally become a magical new older car. No, what happened was now that if you go to try to sell it, you're not going to get as much as what you paid for it. So it loses value. And unlike things like a house, other types of investments which tend to gain value over a time, cars almost never gain value. Cars almost always lose value over time. So owning a car, while it is great, and at some point you don't have to make payments anymore, that's nice. You're not going to get much back if you try to sell it or trade it in or something like that. So you have to be very careful. Sometimes leasing just makes sense for you. Mine's a Tesla. A Tesla. Oh, I want one so bad. I drove a friend's Tesla, and that thing literally does 0 to 60 in like less than 3 seconds. Like he just hit the gas pedal, and we were in like a closed area. No one was around. He hit the gas pedal, and we were at 60 miles an hour all of a sudden. And I was literally knocked back in my seat. I felt like I was taking off on a rocket ship. But yeah, we all have our dream car. Maybe with leasing, you can afford it. But a dream car it's a 1 million. Yeah, Tesla's not as bad. You can get a Tesla for like 50 grand, which is still a lot of money, but it's not like one of those super duper cars that, billionaires drive. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So anyways, like I said, the disadvantage is you don't own the car. You're usually limited to the amount of miles you can drive, so you can't just make it your road trip car. The reason is the more miles you drive, the more wear and tears there is on the car. So when you return it to the people you leased it from, it doesn't have as much value if you drove it a lot more miles. So they put limits on it. You can't end the lease early without penalties. You have to cover your own repairs. So leasing does not cover maintenance. So it's still, it's not great. It's not terrible. It just depends on your situation. A few other things we'll talk about. When it comes to cars here, we won't go into super detail, but auto insurance. Insurance is basically you agree to pay a certain amount each month so that if there's some kind of catastrophic cost that must be incurred on something, the insurance covers all or part of that cost. It's very complex, but there's several different types of insurance. If you are buying a car and you are making payments on it, so in other words, you don't outright completely own it yet. You're still making payments on it, and technically part or all of the car is still owned by someone else in a way. You are required to get certain types of insurance. If you already own the car you're driving, you only need a type of insurance called liability. And these are the two components of liability. So if you're driving a car you already own, you only legally need liability insurance. What liability basically does is it covers the other person if you cause an accident. If an accident is deemed to be your fault, it covers the other car or cars. It also offers medical money for their medical bills, I should say, bodily injury, if you will. So that's true. Everyone is required by law to have at least liability. However, if you also if you're paying off a car, not only do you have to have liability is naturally required anyways, you're also required to usually have at least collision coverage, which not only pays for the other person, but also pays for your car, the damage you've sustained on your own car if you're in an accident. That's what collision is. So you already have to cover someone else with insurance, but if you haven't paid your car off yet, you also need collision coverage. That's so that the person or the agency or the financing group that still owns part of your car, that's so they're covered from financial loss. They're forcing you to get insurance, and you have to pay for that insurance in order to cover any losses to the car that they own part of. So that's them forcing you to pay for insurance for their benefit. It does help you too, though. But of course, the more insurance you have, the more it costs every month. Also, the more risky an insurance company deems you to be, the more you're going to pay for insurance. That's why 25 is usually the magic number. It's the magic age where most people's insurance rates drop. And if your rates don't drop when you turn 25, if they don't drop automatically within like a month or two of it, you can shop around for new insurance and someone will give you a cheaper rate most likely, depending on your situation. So if you have known to have caused a lot of damages and a lot of car accidents and whatnot, things that cost money, your insurance is probably going to be more expensive. If you're considered a safe driver, you don't cause accidents, you don't get a lot of, even traffic tickets can raise your insurance rates. Then you can get cheaper insurance. What's that? It depends. Yeah. If you cause an accident and you have the collision coverage, and you can get collision coverage even if you outright own your car, you're allowed to, you're just not required to. Then it'll cover your own car. It'll cover yourself plus the other person. Of course, your rates are almost certainly going to go up right after that. That's why a lot of people, if they're in a little fender bender, they slightly tap your car, no one was really hurt, the car's not really super damaged, most people will say, let's just call it and drive off from here. Or maybe they'll agree to, you give me $500 and we won't. They won't inform the insurance companies because then insurance rates will go up, almost guaranteed. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Having a car is a huge pain in the butt sometimes, isn't it? It's needed, it's convenient, it's also expensive to own a car, and it's a pain, especially if the car breaks down a lot. And listen, there's nothing more stressful than having car issues, especially if you don't have the money to repair the car. That is very stressful. It keeps you up at night and eats away at you. And then finally, there's comprehensive coverage. I believe if you if you're paying off your car, you also have to have comprehensive. And that covers things that could happen: fire, theft, falling animals, acts of nature, collision with animals. That can cover things that happen to your car even when you're not driving. Now, let's look at saving money with a used car. So most people, especially if you're younger, frankly, when you're younger, you tend not to have the money to buy a nice brand new car. You'd love to, but you just can't. That's why you'll see a lot of people who have saved their money or are making more money. They have more work experience, things like that. They might go treat themselves and buy a really nice car or something. But a lot of younger people we don't have those options. So you could either get a new car, a brand new car. It costs $25,000. You can get a 4-year loan with 7.9% interest. Or you can get the same car, but just a 3-year-old model. It'll only cost $14,000. Now, because it's a used car, it's considered a little bit riskier, so they are going to charge a slightly higher interest rate, 8.45% instead. But what we can see is that if we use this formula, rather, to calculate the payments in each case, if you get the brand new car, 4 years at 7.9% interest, a $25,000 car, your monthly payments are about $609 to the nearest dollar. However, if you go the used car option, instead of getting the brand new one, you get a used one. 3 years old isn't too old. You're only going to be paying $345 a month. You're going to pay the car off at the exact same time, 4 years from now. But you're going to have a lower monthly payment. So the nice thing is that's usually what people have to do. You can save $264 a month by getting a used car instead of a new car. That's usually just what you have to do. One other thing, one other wrinkle we'll throw into this. Let's say you buy a $25,000 car, but make a 20% down payment, then finance the rest. And let's say you have a 5-year loan with 9% interest. So the way down payments work, that's an amount of money you have to walk in and pay right now. Now, a lot of us, you take $25,000, you make a 20% down payment. That means you're paying off right away 20% of the car. Now, 20% of $25,000 is $5,000. So right off the bat, you walk in with $5,000. That means you don't have to borrow as much. Some places will require you to make a down payment to prove to them that you're worthy of financing, because you can get a loan and you're no guarantee to pay that loan back completely. And they don't want to be on the hook for a lot of money if you don't pay them back. They will lose money in that exchange. So if you made a $5,000 down payment, that means you take the price of the car, subtract off the down payment, you're going to be left with $20,000. This is going to be the amount to finance. And thus, we would still use this exact same system over here. Even though the car costs 25 grand, you're only borrowing 20,000. So you'd still use a p-value here of 20,000. So just keep that in mind. That's how down payments work. And a lot of the times you're required to make a down payment when you buy a car. Sometimes you're not. Sometimes car dealerships that do their own financing, they will have no down payment deals. And, almost every month is truck month, or I think it's March or February or something like that. What that means is they are trying to sell trucks. They usually will do it right before the new models come out, and the previous models lose a lot of value as a result. They'll have all kinds of special financing deals. They'll say no money down, 36 months, blah, 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 and they'll tell you all these wonderful things. And that's fine. If you put no money down, you're going to be spending more in interest. The reason is that if I didn't put any money down here, I'd have to pay $25,000. I'd have to get a loan for that much. And so that's that much more money you're going to be paying interest on. But again, it depends on your financial situation. The cost of home ownership, hopefully that will brighten up here in just a second. There we go. What's that? Yeah, those are extraneous concepts. Yeah. So the cost of home ownership. Well, let's talk about it right now. One of the great American dreams is to buy your own home, or to buy your own land, maybe build a home on it. You're the owner of it within reasonable restrictions. You get to decide to do what you want to do with it. If you're just renting a place, which unfortunately a lot of people have to rent, and sometimes renting makes perfect sense. There's nothing that says you must buy a house. It may not make sense for everybody. But there are some downsides to renting. The first one is that your rent payment each month, that money is gone. That money's gone. You pay your rent, you're never going to see a dime of that again, short of some kind of weird, you get some money back because they had to close the apartments. I don't know. But basically, your rent is money that you're paying, it's gone. If you own a home and you're making your monthly payment, your mortgage payment, part of that payment is going to pay off the house, part of it's going towards interest, but the part that's going to pay off the house is going to lower the amount you still owe. So now you're building what is called equity in the home. You are literally slowly over time, as you make more payments, you are owning more and more of the house itself. So when maybe you want to sell that house in 10 years, what you have to do is you sell the house. Hopefully you'll get a much higher price than what you paid for it, because it's 10 years later and the home value should have gone up. You pay off the rest of the loan that you owe on that house, and then you get to keep the difference. If the house went up $200,000 in value and you paid off $75,000 of the house in that time, then you're going to make $275,000 off that transaction, which is one of the major reasons people buy a home. So the nice thing about owning a home is that your monthly payment will go towards actually building equity in something. You're slowly getting more and more of the house, and you're actually going to own it. Another thing about home ownership is that if you decide, hey, I don't like the way the stairs look, or hey, I want to do something to the back porch, I want to bring in all my own stuff, I want to remodel the house, I want a fireplace in my house, I don't want a fireplace in my house, you cannot do that. You can't touch your home in a rental property. Even if you drive some nails into the wall to hang up some pictures, they're probably going to ding you on that. You're going to have to pay that back in some way. Usually they take it out of the deposit. So that's one of the nice things about home ownership. One of the downsides of home ownership, of course, is that you are 100% responsible for your own repairs. If something breaks in your house, if your air conditioning unit goes out, that might be a $10,000 to $15,000 fix that if you were renting, the rental company is technically responsible for. Now, that doesn't mean they'll repair it in any kind of reasonable time frame, but that is what's going on there because the rental property or the rental company owns that house that you're on. So they need to fix it both for you to have air and also because they need it for their own property. They need to fix it. So there's a lot of interesting differences between renting and owning. So let's talk about some of the basic terminology. This is really cool. What you call a home loan is a mortgage. It's usually long-term. The reason it's long-term is because a house is expensive and housing prices in DFW have gone way the heck up. Just 10 years ago, you could have gotten in like Fort Worth, you could have gotten a really, really nice house for about $150,000 to $170,000. And it's a good, it might be considered a starter home, but it'd be a nice house in a nice neighborhood. Now that same house might cost $250,000 to $300,000 just 10 years later. That's wild. That's wild. That's why you want to buy as soon as you can, when you can, because house prices are only going to be going up. And if they go up after you already bought the house, that in most cases only benefits you. Of course, your property tax is going to go up too. So that does suck. A mortgage is a long-term loan. You're borrowing a ton of money, so it takes a long time to pay it off. If you look at the breakdown of the word mortgage, mort is literally Latin for to kill. Mort, think about a mortuary. It's a place where dead bodies go. And so the mort in Latin has to do with the concept of killing or death. And that actually is used very deliberately because when you have a mortgage, you're paying it off slowly over time. You are slowly killing it over time. Each payment is slowly going towards paying it off and killing what you still owe. Next up, you usually will have to make a down payment. It's what we talked about earlier. It's the exact same thing, only now it's a house instead of a car. The down payment is the portion of the sale price of the home that the buyer initially has to pay to the seller. There was a time many years ago now where it was pretty much standard that you had to put a 20% down payment down, meaning you could only buy a house if you paid for 20% of it right off the bat. So if you bought a $200,000 house, you would need to walk in with $40,000 for your down payment. You'd also need money on top of that for closing costs. So that is just not the standard. That's not the norm anymore. But that used to be the norm. Now there's 0 down payment mortgages that you can get. There are 3%, 5%, 10% that are pretty popular as well. So the amount of the mortgage, that is the amount that you're going to borrow, is whatever you're buying the house for, but you subtract off the down payment because you don't need to borrow money that's covered by the down payment. So if you buy that $200,000 home and you made a 20% down payment, You just knocked $40,000 off from what you have to borrow. So you only actually have to borrow like $160,000. You might have heard of something called a mortgage broker. A broker is kind of a middleman, if you will, someone or something, an agency that helps you find a good mortgage that's right for you in this case. There are two primarily different types of mortgages. There are fixed rate mortgages. The rate is referring to the interest rate on the loan. And what they're saying is they won't change the interest rate on you at all during the loan, and thus your monthly payment doesn't change. However, part of your monthly payment, they're only talking about the principal and interest part of it. You also have to pay property taxes. You also have to pay property taxes, and property taxes will go up as the value of the home goes up. You're taxed as a percent of the home's value. So fixed rate mortgages are very popular. You also have variable rate mortgages or ARMs, adjustable rate mortgages. The payments change from time to time depending on changes in the interest rate. Now let's pause for a second. Usually you want a fixed rate mortgage because you can predict what your monthly payment will be. Taxes are going to go up, but they go up in either case, whether you got a fixed rate or an ARM. ARMs are popular because you will usually offer you a lower interest rate up front. But after a certain amount of time, they can change the interest rate on you. Now, it could change down and you pay less each month, but you know, Murphy's Law, it's probably going to go up and you're going to end up paying more. So be very careful with adjustable rate mortgages. They're very popular right now. They're being pushed by a lot of these companies, but I bet in the long run, a company would rather you get into an adjustable rate because they're going to get more interest on you at a time, but not always. So adjustable rates are just inherently kind of tricky. Now, what you can do, you can talk about things called points. You don't really hear that terminology used all the time. Sometimes you do. It's kind of old school. Basically, not only do you usually have to make a down payment, you have to pay off a certain amount of the house right at closing. On top of a down payment, you usually have to walk in with some extra money to cover things called closing costs. And there's tons of closing costs. When you buy a home, you have to get that home in, you have to get it appraised. And that's usually right now about $400 to $500. You pay an agency, they come and look at your home, but they also do a bunch of market value research on your home to decide how much the home should be worth, how much you could sell it for reasonably. So if you're buying a home and you're buying it for $200,000 and the appraiser comes back and says, this thing's only worth $180,000, your loan company is probably not going to be happy and you're going to have to, things are going to change. You usually have to pay for the appraiser. There are all kinds of other closing costs. Usually you want to get the home inspected as well. That's going to be an extra $500, but you want to get it inspected. They look at everything they can in the home and decide, hey, here's what's going to break soon. Here's what's working. Here's what's not. So there's other closing costs to get to, for the title of the house, the deed to the house to change hands, you usually have to pay a title company a fee. So there are these closing costs that are literally fees that are lost. The down payment is money you're paying off of the house, but you still have the value of the down payment because you have already paid off the house for that much. You have more equity in the house as a result. But closing costs, those are costs that you are just going to eat. You're going to lose those costs for the privilege of being able to buy a house. You can usually negotiate with the seller and say, hey, you pay some of the closing costs, we'll pay some of the closing costs. Just depends on your situation. So guess what? The payment formula to calculate your payment, your monthly house payment, is exactly the same as the car payment formula. And that's no coincidence because they're the exact same kind of thing. They're a loan that you're paying off over time. So we're using the same formula. The same formula then is going to be provided for you on a formula sheet on the next exam. Our next exam is 1 week from today, March 10th. It's going to be in class. We're going to be meeting in person and taking a standard pencil paper exam. And we're also going to be meeting in person the rest of the semester. So finally, let's sink our teeth into something here. Let's actually do an example. So you're going to buy a home for $195,000. That's how much the home costs. Usually that's something you can negotiate with the seller. You can make an offer, you see if they like your offer or they don't like it. Now the bank requires a 10% down payment and 2 points at the time of closing. The cost of the home is financed with a 30-year fixed rate mortgage with a 7.5% interest rate. The good news is that interest rates right now are very low on pretty much every kind of loan. The reason interest rates are low is because the Federal Reserve, which lends money to banks, and then those banks turn around and lend that money to people. The Federal Reserve decides how much interest to charge the banks. If they charge less interest, then the banks will charge you less interest. That's what's going on right now. The Federal Reserve has lowered interest rates. So let's do some calculations. Let's find the required down payment. Let's see how much we're going to have in points, things like that. Points is just how much closing cost you have to pay, and it's a percent of the amount you're going to borrow. So first of all, $195,000 you're borrowing, 10% down payment. The first thing you need to do is take 10% of $195,000. Convert 10% to the decimal, 0.1. Multiply it by 195,000. You need to walk in with $19,500 ready to go for a down payment. So this is a down payment is one of the barriers to buying a home, because it's not easy to save up almost $20,000. Or if you made a 20% down payment, you would need close to $40,000. It's not easy to save up that much money. Usually you need that money for other things. So it's not lost. It is difficult to buy a home. It's not something you're just going to decide to do and the next day you're going to be buying one. And even when you're ready and you have all the money saved up, it can be a 2 or 3 month process. It can be a 6-month process if you keep making offers on homes that aren't accepted, they're rejected. It gets really stressful. Anyone who's bought a home can tell you that sometimes it can be very stressful. It depends on the market at the time. So you're going to be paying $19,500 of the home's value. You're going to be paying that right now off the sale price. So the amount of the mortgage, which is the amount that you're going to have to borrow, you take the sales price of the home, you subtract off the down payment, and you are going to need to borrow $175,500. So that is going to be the amount you finance. The more of a down payment you make, the less interest you're going to be paying over the life of the loan, because you don't need to borrow as much money. Next up, you're getting a mortgage of $175,500. Remember, the house costs $195,000, but you're paying off some of it. So you're only borrowing $175,500. If they're saying your closing costs are going to be 2 points of the mortgage, what that really means is you need to take 2% of $175,500, and that is going to be the amount that you have to pay in closing costs right away. So 2% of $175,500 is $3,510. So let's think for a moment. You have to walk in with $19,500. It's a down payment. That money's not lost, though. That's amount of the house that you're already going to own the second you buy the house. So a down payment, while it sucks that you need that much money, a down payment, that's still ultimately your home value. That's value you get in the home right away. But you also need to walk in with an additional $3,510. That's going to be going towards closing costs, and you are losing that money. But that's the price you pay to own a house. It's a very long process. So in total, you need to walk in, let's see, that's going to be $23,010. You need to walk in with a little over $23,000 in order to buy this house. Some of it for the down payment, some of it for the closing costs. That's a lot of money you got to have saved. Now, it's time that we sit down and we need to calculate the payment. We know we're talking about 7.5% interest. It's going to be a standard 30-year mortgage. That's the standard. You can get a lower one. You can do a 15-year mortgage. You can find a 20-year mortgage. Technically, the less number of years you do, the less total interest you're paying. Plus, you'll pay the house off that much quicker. But your monthly payment is going to be a lot higher to compensate. But if you can afford the higher monthly payment, it's usually better to pay it off quicker. So we're going to use our standard payment formula here. 175,500 goes here. 0.075 over 12 goes here and here. Negative 12 times 30 is the exponent down here. So this is how we're going to set it up. And it just so happens it comes out to about $1,227, and it rounded to no change. So your monthly payment is about $1,227 each month. Here's the kicker though. On top of the $1,227, and that's nothing to sniff at, when you're paying off a home, you need to have home insurance, just like you need to have car insurance when you're paying off a car. Your home insurance may run you another $100, $150 a month on top of that. And then on top of that, the real kick in the teeth, you also are going to be paying property taxes with rare exception. There are some places you can buy a home that are unincorporated and don't have a property tax. Also, I believe if you are a 100% disabled veteran of the U.S. Armed Forces, you do not have to pay any property tax. But that's very few people who will qualify to be a 100% disabled veteran. But I have a neighbor who is a 100% disabled veteran. I believe he told me he saves on property taxes. Saving on property taxes is great. You know why? Because property tax can run you another $300 to $800 a month on top of what you're already spending. That's tax money you're giving the government. And that usually goes to pay for local schools. So it just depends on the property tax rate. Tarrant County, just one county over from here, the property tax rate is absurd. It's incredibly high. In Parker County, it's still high, but it is less than Tarrant County. So it's generally a little bit cheaper to live in Parker County than Tarrant. Finally, if you want to figure out the total interest, you take your monthly payment of $1,227, you multiply it by 360. So 1,227 times 360, that means over 30 years, you're spending $441,720 to pay off a $175,500 loan. Wait a minute. That means you're spending $266,220 in interest. Yes, yes, yes. That's a lot of interest. You're spending more in interest than what you even borrowed in the first place, and you borrowed a ton of money in the first place. That's how it works. A long 30-year loan, the interest will be a lot higher than if you only did a 15-year loan and had the same exact interest rate. That sucks. Do not let this be lost on you. Interest adds up. You're spending more in interest than what you borrowed for the loan here.